Hello, everyone, and good evening or good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jacqueline Durakis, and I am the Expeditions Manager for Earth Echo International. We are so excited to have classrooms from all over the globe joining us today as we learn about plastics in our ocean. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. We love participation from all of you watching. So how can you participate? If you're watching from YouTube, you can use the chat space, which is directly below your viewer. And if you're watching on earthecho.org, there is a Google form that you can submit questions. Feel free to submit questions now and at any time during this virtual field trip. Now, this event is part of our 2018 expedition, Plastic Seas. This expedition happened in October in Melbourne, Australia. The Earth Echo team, led by our founder, Philippe Cousteau Jr., brought educators to the front lines of Australia's unique ecosystems to look at the impact and litter and microplastics on the organisms that call Australia home. Our Plastic Seas resources include 4 exciting expedition videos hosted by Philippe Cousteau highlighting our plastic journey. We also have STEM career close-up videos with the experts that we met in Australia. There are youth in action videos highlighting amazing youth and the work they are doing in their communities to fight ocean plastic. And last but certainly not least, the 25 teachers that joined us on Expedition Plastic Seas are now Expedition Fellows and have worked together to make STEM lessons come to life for teachers all around the world. These lessons include learning about a product's life cycle to a STEM design challenge for a Nerdle capture device and lots more. Head over to our website after this event to download these resources for free, thanks to our presenting sponsor, the Northrop Grumman Foundation. We also would like to take a moment and thank our amazing Expedition Plastic Seas partners. We couldn't have done the expedition without you. And now I'd like to introduce our live interactive classroom. We have Mrs. Trooper's class with us from Aurora, California today, and they are coming to us from Bednarik Junior High School. Hi guys, how are you? Good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
I would love to introduce our co-host for tonight's event, Jodi Jones, who's coming to us live from Bowen Island in Australia. Go ahead and take it away, Jodi.
Hello, how are you? Good to meet you all. Hi. Hello.
Hi, Jodi. So you can go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi. Yeah, so hi guys. I'm Jodi Jones. I'm one of the database administration team for the Tangaroa Blue Foundation's Australian Marine Debris Initiative. And I look after a database that has got nearly just short of 3 million items of marine debris logged on it. So yeah, you'll just see on the slides there, when they come up, there's a picture of me there. So I'm a real person. Database people are real. We're not robots. And that's me sitting in front of a couple of our flat-backed turtle nesting sites here in our region. So we have some really gorgeous animals that nest in our region, and protecting them from the impacts of marine debris is really important to the work that I do. So so we go to the next slide. I just want to show you where I live because I've got a picture of my island. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
You can see it? Yeah. So the little blip right at the end of that mouth of that river is about where my house is. So I've got a really beautiful part of the world to live in. It's pronounced Bowen Island, and it's a part of and it's a very, by scale, I think quite a small place, with a town population of about 10,000 people. You can see up in the corner there's a big red dam, and that's a tailing dam from an alumina refinery and aluminium smelter. So we've got a really busy industrial region, as well as one of the largest ports in Australia operating in our region. Could probably have shown you a photo of the harbour as well. So we've got an awesomely large harbour. But it's a little bit of a secret here. We have an amazing biodiversity here. We have all sorts of animals. We've got turtles down in the river, just at the river mouth there. We've got dugongs. We've got nesting turtles here in the region, and we also have we're part of the the migratory birds fly away, eastern fly away. So we actually get eastern curlews and sort of and other really awesome little birds nesting and roosting on our site. Well, you'll see the photo in the middle there. That's one of my children. I have 3 children. That's my middle child, Rowan, and he's an avid marine scientist. He rescues many turtles out in the river there, and he loves helping me with the beach cleanups and looking after the environment. And we're very proud to say that my beach here in Queensland is for the second year running, is the cleanest beach in Queensland, because we worked pretty hard to do that. So I'm going to take you. That's a little bit about me. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a storytelling around the history of plastic, and I'm going to make it quite short because you probably covered a few of these things previously. So plastic was a word that originally meant pliable and easily shaped, and it became a name for a group of materials called polymers, and it means made up of many parts. So they're made up of lots and lots of different chemical chains and complex molecules. So they're synthetic. They're made of all these complex chemical chains. And the first synthetic polymer, there was a few others around, but the first synthetic polymer was invented in 1869 by John Wesley Hyatt in New York. And he won a bursary to provide a substitute for ivory, because ivory was a naturally harvested product that came from elephants and rhinoceros. So it had a fairly limited source, as they kept killing the animals. So originally we started our journey with plastics to try and change what we were doing with our natural resources. They invented a polymer that could stop having to harvest ivory, because they used to use ivory for things like billiard boards, piano keyboards, and things like that. So to manufacture, and jewelry, and a lot of things, in a lot of ways as well. And I don't know if you've ever been to your great grandmother's house and seen ivory handled knives and forks. So they used to use it for those sort of things. So we started the journey with plastics with the best of intentions to stop having to source these natural products. We thought in my time, the paper trees are a limited resource before we started managed forestries. And so we thought, let's make plastics to wrap things in. And about that point in time is where in the history of plastic, things really started to change. We became very dependent on plastics. And plastics are quite clever. We do a lot of really amazing medical things. We do a lot of really amazing scientific things. The laptop that I'm looking at using today is mostly made of plastics. So we have some really clever things that we're probably never going to work out of our lives, but there are a lot of things that we don't particularly need a lot of. And so so when we set out to make plastic wrapping and to reduce the need to clear trees, started replacing natural products with plastics, our consumption of plastics started to increase quite considerably. So we're fast forwarding to today. So around 322 million tonnes of plastic are produced every year. And a majority of these plastics are single use and throw away. So we've got a majority of these plastics we actually throw away. First use, we throw them away. So we've got 7 different types of plastics that we use, and there are a lot more specific use plastics that don't really fall under these banners, but we've got the first type, which is the types that we use for drink packaging and things like cooking oils. they can be really efficiently recycled, and they actually recycle those a lot into polyester clothing. So these plastics are made for a specific purpose, as all plastics. They can only be used once. So if you see that symbol on them, they can only be used just that once, because any further use, they start breaking up, and then they can leach chemicals, which can be harmful. The number 2, which is used for, it's a bit thicker and generally white or opaque. It's used for things like your shampoo bottles and cleaning products. This is a hard-wearing plastic, quite thick. They can be easily repurposed or reused, quite often into outdoor furniture. The number 3 is the ones that are used for things like cling wrap, bubble wrap, and toy wrapping. And these contain a lot of toxins, and we don't like, and they're not easy to recycle. And number 4 is the low density polyethylene, and they are used for shrink wrap and plastic grocery bags. They can be recycled and reused. The number 5 is used for things like vehicle parks. It's quite rigid, and it can be and able to be formed. So you can use, it's used in things like buckets and things like that. Vehicle parks, toys, containers. They can be recycled quite well. 6 can also be used, which is polystyrene. This is tricky to recycle, but it's often used in as a filler in refrigeration panels, used in cosmetics, surprisingly, and toys and packaging. So, and number 7 is a catch-all for all the other products used in things like fake nails, Lexan, BPA, fiberglass, and nylons. Recycling for these is really, fake nails are plastic, guys. These things are, recycling for these is really tricky and very, very limited. So globally, we use plastics from everything, for absolutely everything. But 35% of the plastics that we use are used for plastic packaging alone, and this is a single-use purpose. The next highest one in that would be building, which is about 16%, and then followed by textiles, which is around about 10%. So we use plastics, and the plastics really have only been on this planet for about 100 years, and in the volumes that we're using for about the last 60 years. So we've got a lot of different reasons that we use plastic, but plastic packaging is about 35% of that. So can we go, sorry, we've just gone through the next slide there. That one there. Yep. So we've just gone through that slide. So sorry, guys, I was just talking on that slide. We use about 35% of our plastics for plastic packaging. That's just a chart showing you that application. So it's a pretty, when you think there's 322 million tonnes of plastics being produced every year, and 35% of those is a big number. It's about 9 million just for plastic tonnes of. So what are the impacts of plastic? So plastic has been linked recently to climate change. The plastics are chemicals. They break up. They don't break down into the natural composition. They are chemicals. They'll always be a chemical. As they're breaking up, they're finding that the light and the heat in their environment release gases, and in concerning concentrations, and these include methane, carbon dioxide, and ethylene. So they're finding that and methane, as we know, is a greenhouse gas, and so is CO2. So plastics are actually having some contribution as they're breaking up in the environment to climate change. So very, very good reason to get them out of the environment. Can we go to the next slide? We're all aware of the direct environmental impacts. So wildlife doesn't know what plastic is. It can be easily mistaken, and is easily mistaken and ingested by wildlife. recent research in Queensland, just up here in the Great Barrier Reef at James Cook University, they've found that it takes 14 pieces of plastic to kill a turtle. I don't believe it's 14. I believe it's just one, because that first piece of plastic could be the last piece. That could be it can potentially start to cause harm. So as animals ingest things, they become marine reptiles like our turtles have got very, very long and slow digestive systems. So those things take a long time to work through. We can direct entanglement. I rescue probably a directly entangled animal once a week here, from fishing line and things like that. So yeah, and that definitely can cause quite severe injuries and potentially death. Something that people underestimate with plastics is the effects on human health and our human economy. Plastics don't break down, they break up in the environment, so they often leach a lot of toxic chemicals, which can have an impact on water quality. And our drinking water quality if this debris is in your freshwater systems. So they're a serious concern to health, and it's estimated that 11.1 billion plastic items are entangled in our coral reefs across Australia, in the Asia Pacific. So it's a big number, big numbers there. And plastic waste management is critical for reducing the diseases that threaten these ecosystems. Plastics are a serious health concern. Oh, we missed a slide. Yeah. So yeah, injuries can from just in the previous slide there was injuries like any of the sharp items. Another interesting thing about plastics is that as they break up, plastics become quite rough, and little microorganisms and bacteria can actually bond to those surfaces, making them quite dangerous in that they can be then carrying high surface particles of things like salmonella and lots of different and other little things that you potentially, if you trod on that particular item on the beach, you could make yourself quite sick. And really important to know that every single piece of plastic ever made is going to be on this planet for hundreds and hundreds of years. So more concerning is how we're going to manage plastics in our food chain. So we are starting to find that you can see on the graphic there. So small and smaller particles become really easy to ingest. So these are right down to plankton levels in plankton. So and as these things come up our food chain, those chemicals are becoming a part of the tissues of the animals that are in our food chain. So things like eating fish, but even some plants and corals in the Great Barrier Reef here are starting to absorb these chemicals, and it's creating health issues in those animals. So and we will see, and we have seen in studies in the US, UK, and in Australia that species of animals are actually eating these plastics, and then there are actually some links to diseases in these animals from plastics. So we need to be watching this space, because we don't want to be creating a compromised food source for our future, do we? It's not a good idea. We have a time here to stop and have a talk about that little bit about plastics.
Great. Thank you so much, Jodi. So I'm going to go to Mrs. Trooper's class real quick and see if they have some questions for you. Girls, do you have any questions?
I was wondering, because plastic was made as a solution for ivory consumption, what problem would getting rid of plastic cause for us? Like, would it cause too much deforestation, or like too much energy used to use glass alternatives?
So, and that's a really great question. Sustainability, and I'll talk a little bit. There's a lot of research going into sustainability and alternatives. So, since we the resources that we have now and the technology that we have now for being able to create and farm natural products is a lot better than it was 50 or 60 years ago. We're a lot clever. We're very much able to grow different natural fibres in very high volumes that we can and more efficiently than we were many 50 years ago. We have a lot more. Our government, in particular Australia, has invested a lot in forestry, and a lot of those areas are quite well managed in that it makes them quite sustainable and able to produce paper wraps and things like that, even from offcuts of other products. So there is a balance we have to work on, and we have to work on getting those balances right and having those alternatives available while we phase out some of these single-use plastics, and be able to sustain that as well. So ivory, we don't have an ivory trade anymore on the planet. It is illegal to be doing that, because we do have plastics available for those. It's probably one of the plastics we won't be ever able to replace. So we have to think about the plastics that we can replace.
Great question. Do you guys have one more? Or we can come back later if that's okay. Come back later? Okay. So Jodi, we did have a question from earthecho.org, and that is, what is the most common piece of rubbish that you collect in Australia?
Do you mind if I have a look at a screen over here? Because I will tell you exactly right now in real time what that is.
I think I have a. Can I have a guess?
You can have a guess. Absolutely.
I'm gonna guess cigarette butts.
It'll be close to the top two. So I spoke before about, and I'm just bringing up the screen. It takes a little while to load because there's a lot of information here. I spoke before about plastics, how they break up in the environment. So it happens to be that plastic fragments, unidentifiable parts of plastics, as they break up, are our highest, most often found item in Australia. So our average in Australia here is actually a piece of litter every 2.4 metres. And that actually holds true to absolutely any beach line that I've walked ever. So sometimes it's higher in density. So depending on the spaces, because we have got lots of ocean currents that influence our.
So it's just plastic fragments that are that
plastic
common?
Fragments, yeah, and they've come from somewhere as an item. Sometimes you can sort of go in our Clean Up Australia Day event on Sunday. We found one piece of fragment, and I looked at it, turned it over the other way, and I went, "Oh, it used to be a potato peeler." So yeah, how even that gets out there, we don't know. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that question was from Kings Lake Primary School. So just want to say hi to Mrs. Hawkins' class, who's watching us right now. And
hello, Mrs. Hawkins.
We had a question from YouTube, and that is, what problems can occur to humans when they eat fish that have eaten plastic?
So I'm not sure whether or not you've all had, here we go. I can tell you those exact numbers. So second highest number is cigarette butts and filters. And in the last 2 years alone, 48,335 cigarette butts have been collected in Australia. That is followed very quickly by remnants of plastic bags as well. So plastic drink bottles have actually started on the decline in Australia, and that's just it's about 7 million, and they sit at number 7 for the last couple of years. So sorry, that last question there was the one from YouTube.
It was, what health problems can occur when we eat fish that have eaten plastic?
Okay, so plastics leach toxins. So because they are chemicals, so we know things like BPA and things like that are linked to certain cancers, and it's a field that is evolving quite quickly, because we need to know some answers to what we can be expecting. We know that in some fish species we've been finding tumours and things like that, because those plastics, as they leach, it's not only just it's what they're absorbing out of their food, because food in any organism is a chemical reaction. So how we break those things down into our muscle tissue is something that's being quite rigorously studied at the moment, with levels of concern that there could be potentially toxins in those foods that could, and if we eat enough of those foods, we could start seeing things like different. We could start seeing links in humans to cancers and things like that. But that's a very, very new field, and a field that's being studied quite rigorously at the moment to try and get some of those answers for us. Hello. Hi, Jacqueline. Hello. Hi, Jacqueline, you've stopped. Hi.
And this is Earth Echo. We're just going to keep continuing on with questions. We had one more question from Lance on YouTube. And what is the most common animals injured by plastic?
That would be seabirds, and it's mainly because of their feeding habits, and they are feeding on plastics that are visible on the surface of the water. So seabirds are probably about 78% of seabirds are now impacted by plastics. By percentage, every single marine turtle species is impacted by plastics as well. But it went to a conference last year down here in Bundaberg for the Australian Marine Turtle Symposium, and a lot of scientists were talking about there's very, very little with the volume of plastics in our oceans and the volumes of plastics that they're expecting to be in our oceans by 2050, it'll be very, very difficult for any marine organism to escape plastics. That's where the scientists are thinking, and they're saying by 2050 here, we'll be seeing more plastic in the ocean than fish.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jodi. Now, Jodi, we're going to go ahead and move ahead. We did lose Jacqueline. So this is Casey at Earth Echo International, and we're going to just continue on. I will go ahead and mute, and Jodi, take it away, and we will switch to your slides.
Yeah. So, so we're just on slide 30 there now, I think. So, we've talked a bit about plastics. They don't go away. According to the World Economic Forum, we release about 1 garbage truck of plastic pollution to our environment every minute. And this is an ever increasing problem because we have such a dependency on plastic. 78 million tonnes of plastic packaging alone. Now, we said there was 233 million tonnes of plastic completely produced on the planet every year. 78 million tonnes of that plastic is plastic packaging, and less than 14% of that is recycled of that particular item. And approximately 32%, which is somewhere around 9 million, last time I did math, of that 78 million tonnes of plastic packaging escapes into the environment every year. So that's a huge amount of plastics that we are letting escape. So how long till it's gone? Like there's a lot of, in AMDI we have 174 categories that we categorize marine debris by. Things like paper and cardboard, milk containers, and our paper products and natural fibers, they can take about anywhere between 6 weeks and 14 months to disappear, to break down to back into the natural state. Things like woolen socks, 1.5 years. Cigarette packaging, because they've got like a film or a wax around them, 1.5 years. 20 years for a plastic bag. Styrofoam takes about 60 years. and it's one of the hardest plastics that we have to deal with. Milk jugs, your milk containers, they take 100 years. Aluminium cans, 200. The plastic ring packaging, those ring pulls on 6-packs, they take up to 400 years. Plastic bottles, your drink bottles, 450 years. Disposable nappies are 475 years. And things like fishing line and can be up to 600 years because that's a nylon product. It can degrade before it's gone in the environment. Glass bottles, they haven't been determined as yet, which is interesting. So we've spoke before about environmental impacts. So we also have a lot of impacts on our global economy. You don't want to go to a dirty beach. No one does. There's places in Bali now that people that used to have $1 million annual economies for their villages, and that now the beaches are so dirty, no one goes there. In Australia, it costs the Australian government about $1 billion a year to pick up and retrieve rubbish that is littered into our environment. It also costs a lot of money to make new plastics from raw materials, and litter can harbour diseases, bacteria, and it can act as a vehicle that can potentially spread little microorganisms across the oceans. And I know from a biosecurity perspective, we're not very keen to get little hitchhikers down here in the Great Barrier Reef changing the way our reef is. So yeah, so that's another couple of reasons to be concerned about our plastics. So I work for the Australian Marine Debris Initiative as one of the database team, and we do a few things to combat what's going on with plastics in our environment. Firstly, we do actually actively go and work out and go outside and pick up rubbish, but we do something different with it once you get it. So this is a collection I did the other week, and this is what I found just on my local beach just down the corner here. So we actually actively go and pick it up, and then we record the data item by item into the database. Once we've got, and we did a cleanup day here, we had a National Cleanup Australia Day event here on Sunday, and we removed 202,866 items from the beach. So yeah, it's a huge collection. It's about 161 kilos of debris. So with that information, we take that, we break it up into individual items like straws, cups, packaging. Got a hat here somewhere. It's a hat, cigarette packet, a lid, and this is the fragmented plastic. So not really sure what that was, but it looks like it may have been some sort of container or something at some stage. So we break it all up into individual items, and we record it on the database. From there, we analyse that data on a regional basis, but also on a national, state and international level. We do a lot of education and raise awareness about the issue of marine debris. And really importantly, we use our data to send that to our government so that they can make changes in policy. And we've had a tremendous amount of success in Australia in the last 2 years, we've had container refund schemes developed for both New South Wales and Queensland. In Queensland, plastic bags are banned. We're not allowed to have single-use plastic bags that are our grey shopping bags and things like that. We don't have those anymore. And then we also make source reduction plans as well, which are an interesting little to target specific items. We've had things like last straw on the Great Barrier Reef campaigns to try and target getting rid of single-use straws. So we've been going since 2004, and nearly 13 million items of marine debris have been removed from Australian coastlines. I'm really seriously, oh my God, you're not going to believe this, but it's clocked over 13 million just now. Number of items removed. I looked at it 2 hours ago and we were about 1,000 items short. and AMDI has just clocked over 13 million items removed from Australia. That's pretty exciting.
Yay, congratulations. Sorry
Thank
I dropped
you.
out. You know, technology is great, but sometimes it gets you, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. So 13 million items, that's amazing. So yeah, that's absolutely astounding. So that's and I'll read straight off the screen here. So we have now had 14,893 cleanups that occur in Australia. There's 3,044 cleanup sites. 1,109 tonnes of rubbish have been removed. And that's just within the AMDI program. So we use this data to influence our government and influence the people and having information, like we know that cigarette butts are an issue and a big issue. We can target that particular item to say, hey, what strategies can we employ? Can we deploy that will reduce these numbers being released into the environment? Because plastic doesn't get there by itself. So the top 10 items we've spoke about. We spoke briefly about before. Plastic bits, cigarette butts and filters, film, foam, lids and tops, bottle lids. About like over 300,000 of them in the last 2 years. Packaging, drink bottles, broken glass, straws, and fishing lines. So lots of disposable single-use plastics in the top 10 items here. And yes, we just hit 13 million items. Wow. That's a lot of numbers to be working with. So I do some pretty cool things with those numbers. So if you're ever looking for a really awesome job, become a data scientist, because you can make up lots and lots of graphs and charts that look awesome. So there's one thing, looking at 13 million pieces of 13 million data points. There's a few things that I absolutely definitely know. We're the source of all these plastics. We made them. We're the source of all the plastics littered into the environment. They can't escape there by themselves. Once plastics start getting out there by themselves, I think we're going to have to go to another planet, because we're going to be in a bit of trouble. It's not going to work out for us if we're in competitions with plastics for survival. And the best thing we know about this is we're the solution to the plastic problem. Plastic isn't going to solve the problem by itself, but we can. So just remember that we need to make some choices. So if all we do is clean up, it's all we're ever going to be doing. So we use our data to drive change, because we carefully categorize all of this information. Then we go about encouraging decision-making processes using our information. So how do we go about changing what we've been finding? We ask, every time I look at a data submission on AMDI, I read that and go, what's in there that we can change? What are the sources? How did they get there? Where did they originally come from? So we've used, as I said, we've used AMDI data to change some of the way our government thinks as well, and some of the way our people are thinking in the communities as well. So so we continue to map that and make changes in our own days and in every other in our government. That's the one. As the Earth populations grow, we're going to continue to use plastics. And you might think that we're never ever going to get control over the issue, when it's actually completely the other way. We have absolute control over the issue. But what we need to do is think about absolutely every plastic product we use in your home and in your workplace, and ask yourself, is there an alternative to this, or can I use a plastic that will last multiple uses? I was born in 1974, and on average, on the year I was born, we were using a year 2 kilos of plastic. The average usage now is 43. So our usage isn't going in the right directions. We need to start rethinking how we're using plastics. And over the past few years, I've undertaken a personal journey to try and minimise plastics, as I encourage everyone to do. I've looked at the items that I use, and I've got a really, really funny story for you. Easy things like plastic water bottles and that, they were personal choices. I now have a nice aluminium water bottle that you can see is really, really banged up because I've had it for about 2.5 years. And my choice last year was to get rid of all of my lovely, lovely face scrubs and things out of my bathroom. Because, you've got to scrub and wash your hair and all that sort of stuff. And I've had a lot of those. So I said to my husband, I said, I'm going to get rid of all of these. I'm going to get a nice bar of soap. And I'm going to use that for a face wash and to wash myself with. And he's looked at me like I was crazy and said, I've been using soap for 45 years in a block. I don't know what your issue is. So, mind you, and I think he was also going, oh, wow, I'm going to save heaps of money. Because, I love my L'Oreal face scrubs and my moisturizers and all those sort of things, but I've gotten rid of all of those now, and I've actually found moisturizing products in tins that are reusable and things like that. So I've changed, I've swapped. Kind of wishing that I could swap chocolate out of my diet and get the same achievements, but it's not really working for me. So we have choices, and each and every one of us can make a choice and have that one thing that you change that can make the difference downstream. We don't have to change everything all at once, but we do need to change things enough that we can make as a global community make a difference. So luckily we don't have to do it by ourselves, right? There's a whole system of support out there for us to break up with plastics so that we don't have to be trying to find all of these things ourselves. So the United Nations have developed, and you can just see on screen there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know if you've seen these before, but they're a really, really great guide, and they're the guiding principles for the future of our lives on planet Earth for up to 2030. And when you get some time, you can go through and have a look at those, because there's some really great information in there as to how you can change and make a difference, in the planet as an individual, as a community, and as a species on the planet. We can make a difference. We make a difference in a lot of ways, but sometimes it's not always positive. So to end my presentation today, I'd like to say thank you for listening to me today. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from the Lorax, because the Lorax is really awesome and everyone should quote the Lorax more often, I think. So unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not.
Great. Thank you so much, Jodi. So we're going to take a couple more questions, if that's okay with you. We're
absolutely.
Almost at time, but we have some from the Google form. But first, I'm going to go to Ms. Trooper's class and see what they have to ask.
Sure.
All right. Sure. I was just wondering, is the amount of plastic that you guys find in the sea about the same as the amount on land? Does it have like the same effect on animals?
That's a really interesting point, and I'm feeling a bit silly that I didn't put that in my presentation. So one thing about plastic, it doesn't actually come from the sea. At some point in time, it has come from the earth. It has come from our creeks, our waterways. It's come from our cities. It hasn't manufactured in the sea. There's no process that can make that happen. So these plastics have actually come from us. And when I say that they've come from us, they literally have come from us dropping them on the ground. So, and they wash through our catchment systems and out into the ocean. So as they do that, they deteriorate and change. So firstly, plastics don't come from the sea. They always come from land at some place. Yes, they migrate through our oceans. They aggregate in our oceans in the gyres, but they don't come from the sea. So we always look at that and go, Sorry, feedback.
That's okay. That was a great question. Gross, do you have
a great question.
No, okay. Thank you so much. It was awesome. Oh, do you have one? Go ahead.
On mute.
You're on mute, Miss Trumper. Technology, I tell you.
Yeah.
So we were also wondering if the salt water like changes like the plastic, like does it like corrode it quicker, or does it like change the way it's like recycled?
Yes, you are. That is a correct way of thinking of it, because because the way, like, it's also sunlight as well affects that as well. So different water pH salinities can affect different things. Plastic acts very differently in fresh water, but also in salt water. So it can change what you can do with the plastics when they're recovered, but it also can change how quickly they release the chemicals that are in them as well. There's lots and lots of studies on those as to what toxins are being released at different times, what gases are being released at different temperatures and with sunlight influences and all of those sort of things. There's a lot of science out there covering all of those questions, and we'll have a lot more information in the next few years around how plastics are breaking up in the environment and what effects they're having.
Great job. Thank you, girls, so much. So just to wrap up, we have a question. One person, Ella on YouTube, said that she found your talk really inspirational. So thank you so much, Jodi. I do too. I love this talk. And then Lance would like to know, what is the single biggest change that one person can make?
Easy. Single-use plastics. Your wrapping, your packaging. When you go to a restaurant, sit down and eat in a restaurant. Don't use the takeaway stuff. Just declutter all of those plastic things. Get rid of your plastic water bottles. Any of those single-use wraps and things like that are just constantly being thrown away after the first use. If we choose not to use them, then we're going to have a massive shift in what plastics are available. Go with natural products. Go with plastics that are reusable, lunchboxes or metal lunchboxes, even things like that. They work out really, really well, and they last a really long time. The second thing is we definitely still need to keep picking up what we find. There's two, it's actually two things. Sorry, guys, for homework, but we've got So there's definitely two things. It's easy to do.
I think that's great. And I love your advice too about, starting with one thing. Maybe start with your bathroom and make that plastic free, or start with your kitchen. I think that's wonderful. And I know that you mentioned some of the animals that you rescue, and we have some viewers wondering if they usually survive, and how long do you keep them until you release them back into the wild?
So it depends species by species. So I look after, I think last year I rescued over 700 animals. So anything from marine turtles, which go to specialist rehabilitation facilities, right through to white-bellied sea eagles. So it depends. It does depend on what's happened. Entanglements and things like that, we get them commonly in magpies and a lot of our birds around their feet. So that can take anywhere up to 3 or 4 weeks by the time their wounds have been healed. Or it can literally be just that we can release them straight away if we can treat their wounds. So it does differ. It does vary. Plastics, I know with the Australian Seabird Rescue, they rescue a lot of, and in our turtle rehabilitation centres here, plastics can take months to come through these digestive systems. So cable ties, we had one turtle that had a cable tie passing through it. It was just ages and ages. So it took about 3 months before that was through. And because it affects their body weight after they've stopped eating, because they're all tummy sore, then you've got to start the next, then you've got to sort of start getting them up to weight so you can release them. So on average, I think our turtles are around about 6 to 8 months in rehab. So, and on average, a bird, I generally try and get a bird out in about 12 weeks. My kangaroos, on the other hand, oh my God, they never leave.
Oh, that's so funny. All the Americans are like, we want kangaroos at home.
Oh, no, you don't want kangaroos. No, you don't.
All
You
right.
don't get the sleep.
One last question, again from King Lake Primary School, and that is which data is the government most interested in, and what do they do with the data?
So with the data, we look at data in a couple of different ways. So my local government here has looked at data in trying to develop some of their operations procedures, and we've had some really amazing success. So we've used the AMDI data to identify that there were a lot of plastic cups and forks and things like that, particularly after events that the council was holding. So we now have plastic-free events in Gladstone. Took a long time, took about 5 years to get that information through to them, but no Gladstone Regional Council event will have a piece of plastic at it anymore. So huge change, simple change on a local scale. In the state, we've looked at it as a from an economic point of view, because the state government is the one that funds a lot of our cleanups and cleanup efforts. So $1 billion can be really, really used in a lot of other places here in Australia. So so they've looked at that and gone, okay, what are the items that are most commonly littered? So we've looked at, and in what quantities that we're finding them. So all of our plastic and common items were like our plastic water bottles, our and glass drink bottles, and glass aluminium bottles, so and aluminium cans. So they were identified because they can be recaptured back into recycling streams really efficiently, and become a part of a circular economy for us. So the aluminium smelter, that you saw the big puddle of. My husband works there. They've in the last 4 years started to reintroduce aluminium cans are going into their smelting process. So that's reducing the need for raw materials, and it's also increased their efficiency, which I told them it would. But anyway, so they've done that. So you can make that change. And the government, so we've introduced they just straight up and down banned plastic bags. They just went, well, there's just too many of them. We're not going to, just legislate, we'll get rid of that. So you can't have them. So, but then they've developed the container deposit schemes, which are a great income source for my son, who's collecting hundreds and hundreds of them, because you get 10 cents per item. So he's cashing in at Easter, apparently. And that's how we've used that data. And at a national level, the federal government has now identified a threat abatement program for marine debris, and they've got targets that they're going to try and hit over the next 5 years to capturing that waste, but also prevention measures through compliance and things like that with different items. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jodi. We appreciate you co-hosting this event with us tonight and sharing with us all of your knowledge. It was wonderful. And Ms. Trimper's class, thank you guys so much for joining us. I know it's a little bit late in California, so thank you so much. I just want to go over some upcoming events that we have going on with Earth Echo real quickly. And the first one is our World Water Monitoring Day. So in honor of World Water Day, which is this month, we have the kickoff in 2019 with the Earth Echo Water Challenge. So you can join us for a live virtual field trip just like this one called Water Journeys. And through this engaging virtual panel, students will learn about the importance of water quality and conservation. We will have Water Challenge partners, a leading water monitoring program in critical bodies of water around the world. So join us on March 19th, 2019 at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for that. And we encourage all of you to use our international database to monitor your water wherever you are in the world. Again, this event was part of our 2018 Expeditions Plastic Seas, and that was last year in October when we got to travel to Australia with our founder, Philippe Cousteau Jr. We took educators to the front lines of Australia's unique ecosystems to look at the impact of litter and microplastics on the organisms that call Australia home. In those resources, you can find 4 exciting expedition videos that highlight our plastic journey, STEM career close-ups, including one with Heidi from Tangaroa Blue, who Jodi knows very well. And we also have our Youth in Action video series that highlight the amazing youth working in Australia to fight ocean plastic. Again, last but not least, the 25 teachers that are now Expedition Fellows worked hard to create STEM lessons that are now come to life for teachers all around the world. These lessons include learning about microplastics to designing a new bin for plastics. So there's lots more that teachers can use. And again, those are available for free on our website, thanks to our presenting sponsor, the Northrop Grumman Foundation. Again, we would like to thank our Plastic Seas partners, everyone that helped us along that journey in Australia. And I'd like to thank Ms. Troopers class again for joining us this evening. And again, Jodi, thank you so much for co-hosting this event with us. It was wonderful. We encourage all of you to stay connected with Earth Echo. You can follow along with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, sign up for our newsletter. And again, we would like to thank the Northrop Grumman Foundation. Not only do they sponsor our expeditions program, but they continue to generally sponsor Earth Echo International. So again, thank everybody for joining us online and in their classrooms today or this evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we encourage you all to keep exploring, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Good night.